What's going on, my peoples? Good morning on this Monday morning over here, nice and rainy. Here to talk about another boxing event that we just had this weekend and last weekend of April 26th with Chris Eubank Jr. versus Conor Benn. But we had the big, what was it? Big pay-per-view over the weekend. It was a triple main eventer, and unfortunately, it turned out to be less than a main event. And we also had Canelo Alvarez versus Cole, and unfortunately, we didn't get what we wanted either on that one. So let's get to it, guys, man. Welcome, man, and good morning, everyone, man. I know I've been gone for a little while. I haven't done this for a while here, man. Just been caught up on a lot of other stuff within the boxing arena. However, man, like I said, wanted to talk a little bit about these fights that we've seen these coming weeks. And we'll start off with the Conor Benn versus Chris Eubank Jr. that actually lived up to his hype, right? So everything started off really, really well in boxing with those two fighters, but unfortunately the other cards didn't live up to the hype. But like I said, Chris Eubank Jr. and Conor Benn came at it, came together and gave us the war that we were actually looking for. I give props to the UK and a lot of their fighters because they really always know how to put in a good show. Even their entrances, if you look at their entrances, the way they come into the ring, it's really like WWE-ish. You know what I mean? It's a lot of people, a lot of lights, a lot of performances. These fighters, they really, really buy into the whole introduction. It's a beautiful thing the way they do boxing over there, and they're really hardcore fans over there in the UK. So I knew that was going to be a big fight. And then, trust, it's also a grudge match going way back to when their fathers fought each other, which was also another war that continued on to their sons. So these guys have really, really true beef. They had a true hatred towards each other. And this fight was supposed to happen a few years ago. Unfortunately, Conor Benn was busted with steroids, so I believe he was suspended. The fight couldn't continue. But overall, man, they came in there and they clashed because Chris Eubank Jr., unfortunately, he had to sign a rehydration clause, something that I don't agree with. I'll get into that one day on another video for personal reasons. I think it's very dangerous. I don't think fighters should be signing any rehydration clause, man. You're already hurting your body as it is, trying to make a lower weight that you don't even really walk around with in normal times, right? On top of that, Chris Eubank Jr. had a lot of beef with a lot of the promoters that were promoting the event. So Chris Eubank Jr. was going up against a lot of people in a lot of situations and circumstances on that night. Yet, he still came out victorious at the end. Although he didn't look like himself. You know what I mean? And again, I believe that had to do because of the rehydration, He lost a lot of weight. He couldn't even make the weight of 160. And that just goes to show that I think he's got to continue going up. He's got to fight at 168 pounds. Conor, he looked good, man. For a guy that fights at 147, went up and fought a guy, a real good guy at middleweight. He did his thing. But it just goes to show he's got to come back down to 147 because all the other 168 pounders in that division are big hitters. Conor Benn is not going to be able to withstand those type of powers. Some of those guys that we have at middleweight, they're big punchers, big guys. We know that Chris Eubank Jr. was never a big puncher. He was always more of a boxer. In this fight, though, he came to defend his legacy, his father's legacy, defend the Eubank name, and he fought a warrior type of fight. And again, we got what it was that we were looking for in that fight. So that fight actually lived up to the hype. In other news, in other boxing news, then this weekend, we also had a triple main event in Times Square. And that was a disaster in itself with the event. Now, I'm not going to blame the promoters and the matchmakers because on paper, even the fans like us, we seen it as a big fight. I was excited about this card too. I didn't see this coming out the way it turned out to be. Although we should have known a little bit better because I was talking to a few of my partners and friends at the gym and things like that. And There were little things that I was concerned about. For example, Devin Haney not being in the ring for a whole year and being knocked out the way he was knocked out. So that performance that he had against Jose Ramirez, I'm not surprised, because I thought he should have gotten a tune about him and Ryan Garcia, because both of them been out of the ring for a whole year for different reasons. Of course, Ryan Garcia because he was suspended, because he was caught with steroids in his system, and Devin Haney because he took a lot of damage in that fight against Ryan Garcia. Now, it turned out that Devin Haney did have a tune about, somewhat against Jose Ramirez, because he didn't really get hit because he was doing so much of the moving around, using his feet, and he made it really, really difficult for Jose Ramirez to find his spot, being able to land any clean punches. You know what I mean? It's really, really difficult to fight a fighter like Devin Haney sometimes when he's not willing to engage and is using that whole ring for his purpose. You know what I mean, guys? I love boxing. I love when they use their feet, but let's be honest, it's also, we have to take a little bit of risk. We have to take some chances in order to win the fights convincingly sometimes, if we're trying to, set up a legacy in the future for us. And unfortunately, Devin Haney didn't do that. Devin Haney been taking a lot of heat, for taking Ryan Garcia to court, unfortunately, and they were charging him for battery. Listen, guys, I know what a lot of you guys are saying, but when you take steroids, you're really putting the other guy's life at risk. So I'm not gonna even knock Devin Haney. I know a lot of people were making fun of him and knocking him for taking Ryan Garcia to court for the steroids. I'm not really gonna disagree with that notion, even though I'm a boxing coach myself. Also, I understand what everyone is talking about. But listen, the guy cheated. And if the next opponent wants to go to court and get his money some other how, or try to make the fight happen, hey, why not? You just got cheated on by a guy that was actually using substances that were illegal. So I find that fair square on Devin Haney's part also, okay? But he did take the damage. He took a lot of damage in that fight. I felt like he should have taken a tuna bout, which this fight with Jose Ramirez, once again, as I said, it turned out to be a tuna bout for him. And I still think he needs another tuna bout, because he didn't look good in this tuna bout against Jose Ramirez, Now we need to see whether he wants to engage and box a little bit more. I would like to see the Devin Haney that fought Lomachenko. That was a good Devin Haney that we saw. Ryan Garcia, on the other hand, unfortunately had a big upset loss. He was beaten by Rolly Romero. I actually had picked Ryan Garcia to win this fight by a late round TKO, most likely. I thought he was going to land that left hook that he's so accustomed to throwing. But Rolly Romero did his homework, went to the gym, learned from his losses, came back with a better arsenal. So I'm giving Rolly Romero all the props in the world for, increasing his IQ in this game all around. He was able to take that left hook away from Ryan Garcia by pressuring him a lot more, throwing a lot more punches, and moving a little bit more towards that left hook and taking it away from Ryan Garcia. In the second round, he knocked Ryan Garcia down, and Ryan Garcia, after that knockdown, was never really the same. He said he didn't feel right, So I think in Ryan Garcia's case, I think it was a little bit of both. It was a little bit of rust for being away from the ring for a whole year. And now we don't all know for sure whether Ryan Garcia knew it or not that he had those steroids in his system. I do believe that also played a part, right? Because he was caught with Ostrin in his system. And Ostrin, if anyone knows about this steroid, is basically used for people that have osteoporosis, some type of bone disease and stuff like that, or muscular diseases and stuff like that, right? But it does give you energy. It does give you muscle increase. So that day that he was feeling very, very hype and strong and powerful, most likely had to do with the Ostrin. Now he went into a fight, with a year layoff without the steroids in his body, and most likely he wasn't feeling the same, So Ryan Garcia now, when he comes back, he needs a tune-up bout. I don't see him going to welterweight. I saw Victor Ortiz saying that he's willing to fight him. Ryan Garcia himself, before that fight, with Rolly Romero was actually calling out Ennis Boots. That is all. I believe that's all gone from the table right now because of this performance that he had. Ryan Garcia, I think, also got exposed a little bit more. I think it still shows that he needs to have other arsenal in his game. He's definitely only depending on that left hook. He needs to start learning how to put these punches together. How to use the uppercut, how to use the jab, how to use his feet a little bit better. There's a lot of work to be done with Ryan Garcia. I think he can still do it. He's young. It's not going to be easy. But it was a disappointment on Saturday night with those 3 events. Now listen, let me give props to Teofimo Lopez. He fought a very technical fight against Arnold Barbosa Jr., another fighter that I'm okay with. Arnold Barbosa, unfortunately because of his lack of power, his fights always go the distance and there's not a lot of action. And that's exactly what happened in this fight against Teofimo Lopez. Teofimo Lopez a lot of times is known to be an exciting fighter. Although when he's taking the distance also, some of that excitement is taken away also because he doesn't put too many punches together either. Doesn't take initiative in some of his fights. I'm talking more so like the fight that he had with Steve Claghetti, even though Steve Claghetti is a very good pressure fighter. But I remember when he fought the Japanese gentleman, also the Japanese fighter, he had a hard time. I know that he was going through a lot of mental issues at the time. But when Teofimo Lopez can't knock the guy out, he also sort of like pulls back a little bit and gets lost in the ring and doesn't really know what else to do in there, and he gets more of in a survival mode. In this case with Arnold Barbosa, he definitely didn't do that. He boxed very, very well. He beat Arnold Barbosa to the punch each and every time. I think what Barbosa needed was to be a little bit more aggressive and not try to be so much of a counter punch, because Teofimo Lopez was a little bit quicker. He was always there before Teofimo got there. So, I think Arnold Barbosa needed to be a little bit more aggressive. I think it was the 5th or 6th round, if I remember correctly, where Arnold Barbosa had a decent round because he wasn't really trying to counter. He was just being more aggressive, letting his hands go for a little while, and that gave him a productive round. If he could have done that a little bit more, it probably would have been a different fight, and we would have had a different decision. But Teofimo Lopez got the win fair and square. He did good. He boxed well, and now he's on to the next. And what is next for Teofimo Lopez? Well, listen, he's dissed Terrence Crawford. He's also said that he will be looking to fight Jaron Boots Ennis also, which, I think that would be a good fight at this point right now. I would like to see that fight. And there's a lot of other guys that Teofimo Lopez could fight. He could fight Brooklyn's own, New York's own, Richard Hitchens. There's also the Dominican guy, Albert Puello. We have also in the junior middleweight Gary Antoine Russell. We have Liam Parrow. We have the Puerto Rican sensation Subriel Matias. Jack Catterall is still up there in the UK. And Sander Martin, who actually, I think he got robbed by in the fight against Teofimo Lopez, so they might void him. But he's there in the division hanging around also. So there is options out there for Teofimo Lopez, and I would advise him to stay at welterweight. I would say to get that fight against Richardson Hitchens. I think that'll be a good fight for New York, and it'll be a good fight for boxing. But in other news, we also had Canelo yesterday against Skull. That was a fight that, if you guys seen my last video talking about that fight, I thought that maybe Skull could do some damage because of his height, his reach, his Cuban boxing style. And I was definitely right about the Cuban boxing style, and Canelo not going to be able to knock this man out. But unfortunately, man, Skull really stunk up that place, man. I mean, like I said, I love boxers, and there was similarities in Canelo versus Skull. Versus Devin Haney versus Jose Ramirez. It was very, very similar, those fights. You had two Mexican fighters, trying to find their opponents in that ring, and they weren't able to because these guys were just using their feet too excessive. But Skull, man, listen, for future references, brother, man, you got to learn that when you're going to go and take that title from a champion, you got to do more than showboating and dancing around and stepping around and all these little dance steps that you was doing side to side. They're all cute, man. But when you're not a champion and you're not a title holder and nobody knows you, fight fans are there to see a fight. You know what I mean? We want to see you try to take the title away from the champion. This is why so many times we hear a lot about old school fighters talking about the old school days, because that was the mentality back then. The mentality wasn't so much about you getting paid, you getting the money. It was about you getting the big fights and, you know, trying to establish a legacy. And unfortunately, School didn't do that, man. I think he lost a lot of points for that fight. He might have a hard time for promoters to put him on another card, even though he boxed well. That division, the junior middleweight division, is a little bit stacked. There's a few names out there for School to get busy with, like Munguia, Berlanga, Caleb Plant. Those are fights that still could be done. And again, School probably learned a little something from this fight, and he'll do better against some of those other super middleweight contenders there. As for Canelo Alvarez, listen, man, I like Canelo Alvarez. I've always been a fan of Canelo Alvarez, but it is really getting a little tiring to see him against these type of opponents that we don't really know who they are or that we know that he's gonna beat. And again, he left us hanging with the fight against Benavidez, and it's really looking like we're never going to see that fight happen. So unfortunately, we're going to have to wait and see what type of decision Canelo makes after this fight. Like I said, there's some names up there in the junior middleweight division that I believe that he could take on. There's a few middleweights out there that are really, really tough. Chris Eubank Jr. just came off that victory over Conor Benn. I did hear that Canelo was mentioned to him, and he's down to fight Canelo. That'll be a huge fight in the UK, I believe. But once again, that's a fight that we all know that most likely Canelo will pull off at this stage of his career. Even though Chris Eubank and Canelo Alvarez are the same age, been around many years in the boxing game. Chris Eubank is a decent boxer. But again, we know who Canelo is. We know that style sometimes to make fight. And, the way Chris Eubank looked against Conor Benn, would kind of like give us a cue of what it will look against Canelo Alvarez. But that's it for it, guys. That's it. That's all for all from me for today, guys. Oh, no, and I'm sorry. Yeah, we forgot. Inoue versus what was his Campus last night? Well, he came in and he saved the day, guys. You know what I mean? He got knocked down, got dropped in the second round, man. Inoue got to start being a little bit more focused in those early rounds. Keep his defense a little bit tight. He gets a little bit overwhelmed, I think, or a little bit too excited sometimes and walks into these punches, right? So he has to be careful with that. But it was a great fight last night. Inoue has a lot of competition in his division. We don't know whether he's going to go to 126 or he's going to go back down to bantamweight to 118 pounds. Most likely, the big name there right now for him to fight is Junto Nakatani, who's also from Japan. They're looking to that war to be like a King Kong versus Godzilla type of fight. I definitely want to see that fight. That's definitely going to be that fight, a great fight. There's also Roman Chocolatico Gonzalez, another favorite, man, but he's been away from the ring for some time. He hasn't been looking like the same boxers that we all know from back in the day. So, I don't know if that one is going to happen. Now, if Innuendo moves up to junior featherweight, I want to see him fight Murajan Akhmadaliev. I think that's the best opponent in that division already. Everyone knows he kind of took care of already. There is Alan Picasso from Mexico, but I don't think he's ready for Inoue. He doesn't have the power to keep Inoue away. He looks really, really, slim, against Inoue. So we're not really excited about that fight. There's Elijah Pierce, John Rio Casimero, and Shabazz Massoud. Those are all good opponents that Inoue can make some money with in the near future. So, but I think there's another fighter that I would like to see Inoue fight. If he does go to featherweight, once again, he has a hard. There's going to be harder for him. You got Nick Ball, you got Rafael Espinosa, you have Stephen Fulton, you have Angelo Leo, who's I'm pretty sure a whole lot better than what than he was showing before. After he knocked out Veneno, he's been looking pretty dangerous. Then you guys also guys like Robesi Ramírez from Cuba, an excellent boxer. But these guys I think are a little too big right now for Inoue. So I advise them either to stay at junior featherweight and fight Murojan, or go down to bantamweight and get that big fight with Junto Nakatani. I don't want to see him against Roman Gonzalez right now. I think that'll be a good fight if Roman Gonzalez gets in better shape. But that's it for now, guys. Don't forget, keep your chin tucked in, your guards held high, and don't forget to protect yourself at all times, guys. All right? Peace.